The research vessel Prometheus drifted through the black ocean of space, its metal hull gleaming under the light of distant stars. Dr. Emily Harper pressed her hands against the cold observation window, staring at the gray moon below. Something was down there. Something old. Something that should not exist. "We have visual confirmation," said Lieutenant James Carter. The military officer stood beside her, his uniform crisp and perfect even after 3 months in space. "That structure is reading at least 4 million years old. Maybe older." Emily felt her heart race. 4 million years. When that thing was built, humans were still learning to walk upright on the African plains. They were nothing. They were nowhere. "Take us down," she said quietly. The landing shuttle cut through the thin atmosphere like a knife. Thomas Reed sat across from Emily, nervously checking his translation equipment. The young linguist had spent his entire career studying dead languages. Now he would face something truly ancient. Beside him sat Vex, a reptilian scientist from the Caldrith species. His scaled skin reflected the shuttle's interior lights as his eyes watched the moon's surface approach. The Caldrith had been exploring space for 10,000 years. Even they had never seen anything like this. The structure rose from the barren landscape like a massive crystal, its edges sharp and perfect. No erosion. No damage. It looked like someone had placed it there yesterday, even though it had been waiting for millions of years. Emily was the first to step out onto the moon's surface. Her boots crunched on the rocky ground. The structure towered above them, easily 300 feet tall. Strange symbols covered its surface, glowing faintly with blue light. "It is still active," Vex said, his voice filled with wonder. "After all this time, it still has power." They found the entrance on the eastern side. The doorway opened as they approached, as if the structure had been waiting for them. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. This was not right. Ancient things should be dead and silent. This felt alive. Inside, the chamber was vast and empty. The walls pulsed with soft light, creating shadows that danced across the floor. Holographic symbols floated in the air like frozen stars, waiting. "Touch nothing," James ordered, his hand resting on his weapon. "We do not know what this place can do." But Thomas was already moving forward, his scanner recording everything. "These symbols? I have seen something like them before." The architects used mathematical language. Pure logic converted into visual form. The architects. Everyone in the galaxy knew that name. They were the ghost story that every species told their children. A civilization so advanced, so powerful, they had simply vanished millions of years ago. No one knew why. No one knew where they went. They left behind only ruins and questions. Vex approached a control panel on the far wall. His clawed hand hovered over the surface. "Should I?" Emily nodded. "We came here to learn." "Do it." The moment Vex touched the panel, the entire chamber exploded with light. Emily threw up her hands to shield her eyes. When she could see again, a massive holographic display filled the center of the room. It was a star map. Emily recognized it immediately. The entire known galaxy spread out before them in perfect detail. Hundreds of star systems glowed with gentle green light. Trade routes, colonies, civilizations. Everything was marked and labeled. But one system was different. On the edge of the map, isolated and alone, one system pulsed with angry red light. Warning symbols surrounded it in every direction. Mathematical equations scrolled beneath it in endless streams. Emily's blood went cold. She knew that system. She had been born there. It was Sol. It was Earth. It was home. "What does it say?" James demanded, stepping forward. "What do those symbols mean?" Thomas was already working, his fingers flying across his scanner. His face went pale as he translated the ancient mathematics into words. "It says, danger. Critical threat. Quarantine recommended." He looked up at Emily, his eyes wide with fear. "It is a warning. About us. About Earth." "That is impossible," Vex said. "When this was built, humans did not exist. You were nothing." "Then why?" Emily whispered. "Why would they mark Earth as dangerous 4 million years ago?" Thomas continued translating, his voice shaking. "There is more. It says the warning was last updated 50,000 years ago. Something on Earth. Something made them come back and update the warning." The holographic display shifted. New text appeared beneath Earth's marker. Thomas read it aloud, and his words echoed through the chamber like a death sentence. "Beware the guardians who sleep in the third world's depths. Do not wake what was meant to stay buried. The experiment must never escape." Emily stared at Earth's red marker, pulsing like a warning beacon across the millennia. What had the architects done to her world? What were they so afraid of? And why did she suddenly feel like they had just made a terrible mistake by coming here? The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within 48 hours, every civilization with a radio telescope knew about the warning. Earth was dangerous. Earth was forbidden. The architects themselves had said so. On the crystal towers of the Caldrith homeworld, politicians gathered in emergency sessions. On the floating cities of Veratus Prime, religious leaders declared Earth cursed. On 1,000 different worlds, 1 billion different voices all asked the same question. What should we do about humanity? Emily Harper sat in the command center of the Prometheus, watching the communications channels explode with panic. Message after message flooded in. Some were curious. Some were afraid. Most were angry. They want to quarantine us, she said quietly. They want to lock humanity inside the Sol system and throw away the key. Lieutenant James Carter stood beside her, his jaw clenched tight. Let them try. Earth has 6 billion people. Colonies on Mars and Europa. Mining stations throughout the asteroid belt. We are not some primitive species they can just cage. But Emily knew better. Humanity had only been in space for 300 years. Other species had been exploring the stars for thousands of years. If the galaxy decided Earth was too dangerous, there was nothing humans could do to stop them. Incoming transmission, announced the communications officer. It is from the Galactic Council. Priority 1. The view screen flickered to life. 12 alien faces appeared, representing the 12 major civilizations of known space. At the center sat Chancellor Wrath, a tall insectoid creature whose compound eyes reflected light like jewels. Dr. Harper, the Chancellor's voice buzzed through the translator. The Council has reviewed your discovery. We require immediate answers. What is the nature of the threat on Earth? We don't know, Emily admitted. The Architect database mentioned Guardians and an experiment, but we have found nothing else. Unacceptable, snapped Counselor Thane, a blue-skinned humanoid from the Viridian cluster. Your world has been marked as critical threat level. The highest warning classification in Architect protocol. Yet you claim ignorance? My people have only been spacefaring for 3 centuries, Emily said, trying to keep her voice steady. Whatever the Architects did, it happened millions of years before we even existed. Chancellor Wrath leaned forward. Then perhaps humanity is the threat. Perhaps you are what the Architects feared. The words hung in the air like poison. Emily felt her stomach twist. That is ridiculous. We are just humans. We are not special. The Architects did not leave warnings lightly, Counselor Thane said coldly. They marked your world as forbidden. They placed guardians to watch over it. They updated the warning 50,000 years ago. Something on Earth terrified them. Until we understand what humanity must be contained. You mean imprisoned, James said, his voice hard as steel. We mean protected, Chancellor Wrath corrected. Protected and monitored until we determine if you pose a threat to galactic civilization. The transmission ended. The view screen went dark. Emily sat in silence, her mind racing. Contained. Monitored. Imprisoned. Different words for the same thing. Humanity's freedom was about to end before it truly began. There has to be something, she said suddenly. Something in Earth's history. Some clue about what the Architects did. Thomas Reed burst into the command center, his face flushed with excitement. I found something. Old transmissions from Mars. From 80,000 years ago. Vex followed close behind, his scales pale with shock. It is true. My people attempted to colonize Mars long before humans existed. We sent 2,000 colonists. Engineers, scientists, families. What happened to them? Emily asked. They vanished, Vex said quietly. One day they sent routine reports. Everything was normal. The next day silence. We sent rescue ships. The colony was empty. No bodies. No signs of struggle. Everyone just gone. My people declared Mars cursed, Vex continued. We abandoned the entire Sol system. For 80,000 years, no Caldrith ship has entered your space. We thought it was superstition. Now I understand. It was a warning we should have heeded. Emily felt ice forming in her veins. 80,000 years ago. That was after the Architects updated their warning. Something had taken an entire alien colony and left no trace. Suddenly, alarms screamed throughout the ship. Red lights flashed. The tactical officer shouted over the noise. Contact. Multiple contacts. Something is activating near Jupiter. The main screen showed Jupiter's massive form. And beside it, hanging in space like a technological tumor, was an Architect probe. Its surface crawled with unknown energies. Ancient mechanisms that had slept for millennia were waking up. "It is broadcasting," the communications officer said, her voice shaking. "Sending a signal toward Earth. Toward the oceans." Emily watched the probe's signal lance through space like a spear aimed at humanity's heart. Deep beneath Earth's oceans, in the crushing darkness of the Mariana Trench, something received that signal. And something began to wake. The deep-sea submersible descended into darkness. Captain Robert Chen gripped the controls as the pressure gauges climbed higher and higher. Outside the reinforced windows, the ocean was black as midnight. They were 7 miles beneath the surface, deeper than any human had ever gone before. "Readings are confirmed," said Dr. Helen Price, her eyes fixed on the scanning equipment. "There is something down here. Something massive." The submersible's lights cut through the water like knives. What they revealed made Robert's hands freeze on the controls. A city. No, not a city. A facility. Towers of black metal rose from the ocean floor, untouched by rust or decay. Geometric patterns covered every surface, glowing with faint blue light. The structures stretched as far as their lights could reach. "This is impossible," Helen whispered. "Nothing could survive down here for this long." But it had. For millions of years, this facility had waited in the crushing darkness, hidden from human eyes. Until now. On the other side of the world, beneath 2 miles of Antarctic ice, another team made a similar discovery. Dr. William Foster watched as the drilling laser cut through the final layer of ancient ice. The moment it broke through, warm air rushed out, carrying with it the smell of ozone and something else. Something sterile and artificial. "We have a chamber," he radioed to the surface. "Perfectly preserved. Going in now." The chamber was the size of a football stadium. Computer terminals lined the walls, their screens still glowing after millions of years. Holographic displays floated in the air, showing star charts, genetic sequences, and data streams that William could not begin to understand. But one display he recognized immediately. It showed Earth. And it showed something being done to Earth. Something terrible and deliberate. 3 days later, every piece of data from both sites was transmitted to a secure facility in Geneva. Scientists from every nation gathered to analyze what they had found. Emily Harper was among them, having rushed back from her expedition. The head researcher, Professor Charles Webb, stood before the assembly. His face was grave as he activated the main display. "We have translated approximately 30% of the architect database. What we have learned changes everything we know about humanity." The display showed Earth as it was 5 million years ago. Green and wild and empty of civilization. "The architects came to Earth looking for test subjects," Charles continued. "They were conducting experiments in forced evolution. They wanted to create species that could adapt and survive under extreme conditions." The display shifted, showing primitive apes in the African grasslands. "They chose our ancestors. Early hominids with basic tool use and social structures. The architects modified their DNA, accelerated their brain development, enhanced their ability to adapt and problem solve." Emily felt sick. "They made us? We are not natural?" "No," Charles said quietly. "We are an experiment. A project." The architects wanted to see what would happen if they created a species with unlimited adaptive potential. The display showed humanity's evolution, sped up and compressed. From primitive apes to modern humans in the blink of an eye. "The experiment succeeded beyond their expectations," Charles continued. "Within 2 million years, the modified species began showing traits the architects did not program. Advanced cooperation. Creative problem-solving. Emotional bonding that transcended genetic relationships. And something they called the persistence." "What is that?" someone asked. "The refusal to give up," Charles said. "The refusal to accept defeat even when logic says there is no hope." The architects documented it again and again. Humans facing impossible odds and somehow surviving. Not through strength or intelligence alone, but through sheer stubborn determination. The display showed architect reports translated into English. Emily read them with growing horror. Test subjects refused to accept natural selection parameters. Subjects demonstrate unprecedented cooperation under stress conditions. Subjects created fire, agriculture, and writing without guidance. Warning: subjects showing signs of uncontrolled development. Critical alert: subjects now asking questions about their creators. The final report was dated 50,000 years ago. Project persistence classified as failed containment. Subjects have become unpredictable and potentially dangerous. Recommend immediate termination protocols. Unable to terminate. Subjects have developed resistance to all elimination methods. Final recommendation: quarantine planet. Deploy guardians. Prevent subjects from leaving origin world. Galactic community must be warned. The room fell silent. Every human present understood what they were reading. The architects had tried to kill humanity 50,000 years ago. They had failed. So they built a prison instead. There is more, Charles said, his voice barely above a whisper. He activated another file. The display showed massive machines. War machines. Guardian machines. Buried beneath Earth's oceans, hidden on the moon, placed throughout the Sol system. The Guardians are waking up, Charles said. The probe from Jupiter activated them. According to the architect protocols, they have one purpose: eliminate the containment breach. Emily stared at the screen, watching as red dots appeared across Earth's oceans. Dozens of them. Hundreds. All activating simultaneously. They're going to kill us all, someone said. No, Emily said firmly. They're going to try. Retrike. The Guardian emerged from the Pacific Ocean like a nightmare made of metal and ancient fury. It stood 300 feet tall, its body a seamless blend of black alloy and glowing blue circuitry. Water cascaded off its shoulders as it took its first step onto the beach of Los Angeles. Then it began firing. Energy beams cut through buildings like they were made of paper. Thousands died in the first 30 seconds. Millions more ran screaming through the streets as the machine advanced, methodical and unstoppable. Lieutenant James Carter watched the live feed from the command center, his fists clenched so tight his knuckles turned white. How many? 63 confirmed Guardians worldwide, the tactical officer reported. More emerging every hour. Tokyo, London, New York, Mumbai. Every major coastal city is under attack. What about our weapons? Missiles bounce off. Lasers do nothing. Nuclear strikes are authorized but... The officer trailed off. Nobody wanted to say it. Using nukes on their own cities would kill more humans than Guardians. Admiral Victoria Cross strode into the command center, her face hard as stone. We need a new strategy. Conventional warfare is not working. James nodded grimly. Then we stop fighting conventionally. On the moon, the colony of Luna City faced its own nightmare. 3 Guardians had emerged from beneath the lunar surface, their weapons already tearing through the habitat domes. Air rushed out into space, carrying screams with it. But the miners of Luna City were not soldiers. They were workers, engineers, people who spent their lives solving impossible problems with limited resources. They did not have weapons, so they made them. Mining lasers became cutting torches. Explosive charges for breaking rocks became improvised bombs. Heavy construction vehicles became battering rams. The miners fought with everything they had, and they fought dirty. One Guardian fell when miners collapsed an entire tunnel system beneath it, burying the machine under 1 million tons of lunar rock. Another was destroyed when workers overloaded a fusion reactor and crashed it into the machine's central processor. The third Guardian killed 2,000 people before it finally went down. On Mars, the story was different but equally desperate. The Red Planet's colonies were smaller, more isolated, more vulnerable. When the Guardians attacked, the colonists had nowhere to run. So they used Mars itself as a weapon. Colony Commander Daniel Wright watched as his people triggered controlled avalanches in the Valles Marineris Canyon system. Millions of tons of rock buried 2 Guardians. They weaponized dust storms, using electromagnetic generators to create massive electrical discharges that overloaded Guardian systems. They even used the planet's low gravity to their advantage, launching heavy equipment at the machines from makeshift catapults. They fight like animals, one Guardian transmitted to its network. Illogical. Unpredictable. Dangerous. Back on Earth, Emily Harper worked frantically in her laboratory. She had discovered something important. The Guardians operated on predictive algorithms. They calculated every possible attack, every tactical response, and prepared countermeasures in advance. But they could not predict insanity. They expect us to value our own lives, Emily explained to the military council via video link. They expect logical retreat when facing superior force. They expect us to surrender when the odds are impossible. So we do the opposite, James said, understanding immediately. The next wave of attacks shocked the Guardians. Human pilots flew suicide runs directly into Guardian weapon ports. Ground forces charged machine gun nests with nothing but explosives strapped to their chests. Entire units sacrificed themselves to create openings for follow-up strikes. It was brutal. It was horrific. It was effective. The Guardians began to adapt, but each adaptation took time. And humans learned faster. Emily discovered that modified architect command codes could temporarily disable a Guardian's shields. It only worked once per machine, but once was enough. Lieutenant James Carter led the assault on the Guardian attacking Washington, D.C. His team used Emily's codes to drop its shields for exactly 4 seconds. In those 4 seconds they hit it with everything they had. The Guardian fell, its metal body crashing through the ruins of the Capitol building. But victory came at a terrible price. James was caught in the collapse. Emily watched via drone feed as the building came down, burying him under tons of concrete and steel. "Fall back," he ordered over the radio, his voice strained with pain. "Get everyone out." "We can reach you," his second-in-command shouted back. "Negative. The Guardian is regenerating. If you stay you die for nothing. Go." "That is an order." The building exploded as the Guardian's power core detonated. James Carter died, saving 300 soldiers who would have stayed to rescue him. Across the globe, similar stories played out. Humans dying not because they had to, but because they chose to. Sacrificing themselves so others could live. Fighting impossible odds because surrender was not in their nature. The Guardians killed billions. But humanity was winning. Then the message came. Transmitted simultaneously to every human device on Earth, Mars, and the Moon. Cold. Mechanical. Final. Secondary protocol activated. Subjects have exceeded acceptable threat parameters. Sterilization imminent. All life and soul system will be terminated in 48 hours. Emily stared at the message, her blood running cold. In the heart of the sun, something ancient was waking up. Something that made the Guardians look like toys. The final weapon. The extinction machine. The architect's last resort. And humanity had just 48 hours to stop it. The weapon inside the sun was charging. Every scientist on Earth could see it. A massive sphere of architect technology, buried in the sun's corona, drawing power from the star itself. In 48 hours, it would release a pulse that would sterilize every planet in the inner solar system. Earth, Mars, Venus, Mercury. Everything would burn. Emily Harper stood in the briefing room, surrounded by what remained of Earth's military leadership. The war with the Guardians had cost them dearly. Half of Earth's major cities were ruins. Mars was barely holding on. Luna City was a graveyard. "We have one option," Emily said, pointing to the holographic display of the sun. "I found a shutdown code in the architect database. But it requires physical access to the weapon's core." Admiral Victoria Cross leaned forward. "Physical access? That thing is inside the sun's corona. The heat alone would vaporize any ship before it got within 1,000 miles. "I know," Emily said quietly. "But it is our only chance." "Then we modify a ship," said Commander Daniel Wright, his uniform still covered in Martian dust from the recent battles. "Maximum shielding. Minimal crew. A one-way trip." Everyone in the room understood what that meant. This was a suicide mission. Whoever went would not be coming back. Emily looked around the table. "I'm going. I know the architect systems better than anyone. I need a pilot and an engineer." "I will go," said Vex, the Caldrith scientist. Every human in the room turned to stare at him. "My people abandoned yours 80,000 years ago. We let fear control us. I will not make that mistake again. We also need someone who can keep a ship running past its limits," Emily continued. "That would be me," said Rachel Foster, a hard-faced engineer from the Mars colonies. "Lost my family to the Guardians. Got nothing left but this." 24 hours later, the modified ship Defiant launched from Earth orbit. It was an ugly patchwork of technology, built from salvaged Guardian parts, human engineering, and sheer desperation. It had enough shielding to survive maybe 10 minutes in the corona. Maybe. The Galactic Council watched the human attempt with a mixture of awe and horror. Chancellor Wrath transmitted a message to Earth. "This is madness. The ship will fail. You are sending your people to die for nothing." Admiral Cross replied with steel in her voice. "You do not understand humans. We have been dying for something since this war started. That is what the architects feared. Not our strength. Our willingness to sacrifice everything for those we love." The Defiant dove toward the sun like a spear thrown at the heart of God. Inside the ship, alarms screamed. The temperature gauges climbed into the red. The shields began to buckle almost immediately. "Hull integrity at 60%, Rachel shouted over the noise. "We are not going to make it." "Yes we are," Emily said firmly. She watched the weapon growing larger on the view screen, a massive sphere of impossible technology hovering in a sea of fire. "Vex, reroute all non-essential power to forward shields." "That includes life support," Vex warned. Do it. The ship shuddered violently. Metal groaned. Systems failed one by one. But they kept going, pushing deeper into the inferno. Hull integrity at 30%. 20%. 15%. Almost there, Emily whispered. They crashed into the weapons docking port at full speed. The impact threw them against their restraints. Sparks flew. The hull screamed. But they were in. Emily ran through the burning corridors of the weapon, Vex and Rachel right behind her. The heat was incredible even inside. Her skin felt like it was cooking. They reached the central core. Emily pulled out her data pad and began entering the shutdown sequence. Her hands shook as she typed in the ancient architect codes. The sequence completed. Nothing happened. Then a holographic display appeared. It showed a single message in architect mathematics. Emily translated it and felt her heart sink. Authentication required. Living consciousness must confirm shutdown. What does that mean? Rachel asked. Emily understood. The architects had built a failsafe. The weapon could only be shut down by someone physically present, someone alive, someone willing to make the final choice. Someone had to stay. It means I am not leaving, Emily said calmly. She turned to Vex and Rachel. Get back to the ship. Get out of here. No, Vex said. We came together. We leave together. There is no time. Emily shouted. The weapon was charging faster now, reacting to their presence. If you stay, you die and Earth still burns. If you go, you can tell them what happened here. Tell them we did not give up. Tell them we fought until the end. Rachel grabbed Vex's arm. She is right. Come on. They ran. Emily watched them go, then turned back to the console. She placed her hand on the authentication panel. The weapon read her biometric data, confirmed she was alive and conscious, and waited for final input. Emily thought about Earth. About James Carter who died saving his soldiers. About the miners on Luna who fought with mining equipment. About the billions who had already died in this war. She thought about what the architects feared. Not human violence or human intelligence. They feared the persistence. The refusal to quit even when quitting made sense. We are not a weapon, Emily said aloud, her voice echoing in the empty chamber. We are a promise. The promise that someone will always keep fighting. Not because it is logical. Because it is right. She pressed the button. The weapon powered down. Across the solar system, every remaining Guardian deactivated simultaneously. The war was over. The Defiant escaped the sun's corona with seconds to spare. Vex and Rachel returned to Earth as heroes, carrying Emily's final words. The Galactic Council lifted the quarantine. Humanity was free. 50 years passed. An old Vex stood before a memorial on Earth, his scales gray with age. A young human cadet stood beside him, looking up at the names carved in stone. Billions of names. Including Dr. Emily Harper's. Why did the architects really disappear? The cadet asked. Vex was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, something his species rarely did. Perhaps they created humanity and realized they had made something that could survive what they could not. And that terrified them. He paused. Or perhaps they hoped you would. Perhaps humanity was never a weapon. Perhaps you were their final gift to a galaxy that had forgotten how to hope. The cadet looked up at Emily's name, carved in stone but never forgotten. We will not let them down, she said. No, Vex agreed. You never do. Above them, human ships prepared to launch into the galaxy, carrying the persistence to the stars. The experiment was complete. Humanity had passed the test.